Welcome to the Palante Nonprofits podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Ortega, and one of my favorite episodes this season is going to be uplifting the stories of those nonprofit leaders that I get the pleasure of working with, and who are transforming our communities through bold, visionary, and heart-centered work. Today, I am joined with someone I've long admired, Eric Camarillo, the founder and executive director of SALT Outreach. And I want to talk a little bit about how we met. We met at the CNP conference. I don't even know the name of it, but we were both getting our
Yeah,
CNP certification.
yep.
Um, was it Houston? I think that's the only time I've been to
I
Houston. So I
think
think it was,
It was Houston. Yeah, it was Houston.
yeah. And I remember like back then, a lot of you who know me, I've been in the formation game. So I used to fill out 1023s in my sleep. And so I remember him, we talked about what he was doing, and I think you had it filled out, but you hadn't had the courage to submit it, the 1023, to get your nonprofit. And we reviewed it together at that conference, and thus began your journey with, officially getting your 501(c)(3) status for SALT Outreach. But one of the things, like me and Eric have led like kind of parallel lives. We both ran our own orgs. We got our masters at UCF. You stayed very local and focused. The nonprofit I ran was abroad, and I kind of took a different journey, went into consulting and wanted to be a professor, which is why I have my PhD. But like, you did it, man. Like, you are still the executive director of SALT, founder and executive director, and I think you're a non-voting member of the board, and you have taken and worn all of the hats. And, I'm actually really interested too of learning. And with some of our questions that we're going to talk about today is like, you had to learn to run a nonprofit, to be the executive director, and then also like, working with the unsheltered anywhere, you have to learn a lot about what that wicked problem is, right? And I learned that term in my PhD. It's a wicked problem because you don't just solve it with housing. You don't put a roof over someone's head and it
Yep.
everything is cured. It's, as you know, like a very holistic approach of partnerships, of process, of people, of faith, right? You incorporate faith when you're the people you work with want to, and that's, I'm sure you had to learn that too, right? They don't teach you that in your master's
Yeah,
program.
yeah,
And
yeah. That was tough. That was tough to learn because it's so complex and every situation is so different. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
you have to look at those commonalities and target and cater a plan really and strategy for every person that you meet. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so, we're gonna explore a little bit about salt, but you do a lot of salt interviews, and you're super famous from your work with salt. But I want to really get to know you as a leader, Eric. And so, take us back. What really inspired you to start Salt, and how was that growth for you as a leader? Like, what did you know you needed to do to become, the executive director and founder of a nonprofit?
Yeah, so when I started SALT, I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit. I had dropped out of college twice, and I was just, I had become a Christian. I was just kind of, my worldview changed at that time. I was like, man, what can I do with my time, my energy? Like, how can I, you know, do something that makes a tangible difference in the community? And so, I got together with some friends and we put some ideas together and the idea SALT, which is an acronym for Service and Love Together, kind of came to life. And then from there, we just, the goal was to bring different groups and communities and faith communities together, combine resources, combine time and talent to tackle a problem and make a real difference in that issue. So when we started, we were kind of like all over the place. Like we were kind of doing a lot of stuff great. I mean, good, but nothing great. And so as we honed in on our focus over the years, and we focused on homelessness, that's when things really started to kind of grow and scale. When we kind of had that tunnel vision on that one issue. And I think that's important. I think a lot of nonprofit leaders want to, quote unquote, tackle all the issues in the world, and that's great. And I love that when I see that in our fellow, nonprofit leaders and stuff like that. But when it comes to your organization and your focus, you have to be all in on one issue. And even in that issue, there's so many routes you can go. It's important to tackle a route, um, and focus, because that's how you're really gonna scale your mission and your impact with the organization. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, yeah, how we started a little bit.
You said that in a very nice way, but when I talk to my clients, I tell them you cannot absolutely solve all the world's problems. And I think being focused is absolutely key when doing a nonprofit and even when you scale, you might expand services, but your mission stays true. And that's part of
Hmm.
the strategic planning. That's part of like I've worked with orgs and sometimes they're like one perfect example was like if Beyonce's Do Good Foundation, I like to use big names to like put it in perspective, gave you $100,000, Eric, for tutoring. You should probably
Hmm.
turn that down and or partner with someone who already does those services
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you don't do that. You get what
Right,
I'm
right,
saying?
right. Yeah,
Like, you don't do that. And you trying to learn around tutoring and the legality and the liabilities of working with youth. I mean, you opened a youth center, but you know what I'm saying? Like, having to do that would take you years. It would take you longer to actually implement the tutoring program than if you partnered with someone who maybe comes to your, like it's not about taking the money and just saying now we can expand. It's about staying
yeah.
true to your mission and doing that. And I'm so glad you figured that out early because I do think that was key. And you've talked about this a little bit about the momentum also happening during COVID, right? I think there was a
Mm.
there was enough money to invest in kind of on the ground organizations, and I'm so happy that you were one of the ones um, that the city of Orlando and our local government here invested in. What was that? Before I go on to the next question, what was that for you? Like when you finally had money and you had to like hire people and like
Right,
and do
right,
all of
right.
that. What was like that for you?
You know, I think, and kind of going with what you said, I think when you have a good mission statement, you're going to say no a lot. And I think because you should be saying no a lot, because you're going to get all kinds of requests to do all kinds of stuff. And your mission statement is what you filter everything through, right? It's like and for the faith community, it's like in the Bible, like, okay, well, I'm filtering everything through these values, and if it doesn't align with my values, I'm not going to do it, or that's not what I'm going to do. And same thing with the mission statement. We should be looking at that the same way. And so really during COVID, even about a year and a half before COVID, we already knew that we were going to be we had a like a goal. We believed that one day we would be operating at least 3 days a week in the city. At that time in 2018, we're operating once a month. But we were preparing ourselves knowing that one day we will get the money that we need to operate 3 days a week. So we had to kind of build the capacity in the organization and strategize that capacity to be able to receive that, if that makes sense. And so in 2019, we're getting proposals out to everybody for this $200,000 grant that we needed to operate 3 days a week, and we got turned down with every option, every place we went to, even the city at the time. We were turned down. And looking back, I get it. We didn't have the infrastructure or a bunch of young people. It was a risk. There's political reasons too, right? If you invest in an organization and they don't deliver, that looks bad on the investment the city made in the organization. So all that made a lot of sense to me. But it was discouraging, right? It was discouraging because we still believed we're going to get this money somehow from somewhere to operate 3 days a week to benefit our guests experiencing homelessness. And so, but because we didn't know that no, and all the no's we got didn't change what we believed we were called to do. And so we continued preparing to get to that 3 day a week place. And it wasn't until COVID where almost instantly, you know, we had an opportunity for $200,000 to operate 3 days a week in the city during COVID. And because we had already done the groundwork, we had this proposal out there for this. We were building, we had an idea of what it would take to have to be at 3 days a week. We were building that infrastructure already. That's what enabled us to be able to take that donation and actually be successful with it. Because I think I think that, in any nonprofit organization or like you have to have faith um, that you're going to be successful because that's what's going to get you to build the organization in the way that it needs to be for that success, if that makes sense, And I've always believed that um, if you don't have the capacity for it, um, then that opportunity comes. I mean, it's not gonna work. You know what I mean? You have to build the capacity for
Absolutely.
where you believe, you know, you're you want to go and what you want to do. So
Oh my God, I love that. And I love that you use the word like prepare, you use the words preparing to receive it. And like you don't know when, you didn't know when, but like building a foundation to be able to take that on is really what I think differentiates you in a grant application. And, when you're having these discussions, like I always try to tell people, if I'm in the elevator, like your elevator pitch should be able to answer, if I gave you $100,000 now, how would you put that in place? And how would you make sure that
hmm
you spend it correctly versus the other person, you know? And this
hmm
is why sometimes we fall into they keep giving it to the same people. And it's because most of the time people don't want to give money to build something. They want to either expand or scale a formula of something that they know already works,
hmm
right? Like
hmm
I want to invest in something that is less of a risk, right? And even
hmm
as a donor or when you put yourself in those kind of like federal funds or public funds, like you're going to have to answer to someone if that money's not spent wisely or correctly.
Yep.
So there's
Yep.
so much that you need to do foundational. And I think, you being able to say, like, we can turn on 3 days if you write the check tomorrow. It's such a big
Right.
difference from like, well, we might have to figure it out. We need ABC. Like, no, like you had done your foundation and you focused straight on the mission. I love that you said a lot of no's. And if anybody's listening here, like, no's is a full sentence and it's a really important part of how you're going to grow a nonprofit. But I thank you so much for sharing. I want to take it back to our questions now, because you've been speaking and you always speak to your empathy and your compassion side, and I think that's what makes you somebody that people really relate to and resonate with. But your work with the homeless or the unsheltered is deeply rooted in, again, that compassion, but also informed by deep learning. How did you educate yourself about all of the different um, uh, issues or all of the different you know things that you've had to learn to work with the population going through this?
Yeah.
And at least for me, I'll be completely honest, I remember the first time I volunteered, I think we come with our own bias and understanding that, like, they must be homeless because they are not educated or they don't have anybody. And the reality is that I remember speaking to someone, they're like, I'm just homeless because my partner kicked me out and I have no papers, no wallet, no anything. And I didn't have any family in this state. So I had to, like, I've been figuring it out this week. And I was like, oh my gosh, like,
hmm
that's like just 1 week of your life where you're in the situation. And thank God there was salt here to come and get the things you need, to keep moving forward. And that was one story, but like you envision and you build this bias or like this vision of, the homeless are people out on the streets, but they really could be your neighbor, like people that you think are your neighbors, but they no longer are, or students, the youth, your children might know
Yeah.
somebody who's experiencing this and you don't know it. So like the education part, how did you learn more about helping people in this situation?
Yeah, so I think the way that we learned the best was by asking them. We did surveys. So we did the surveys. I mean, even from the beginning, when we started serving the unhoused, we were doing surveys to learn what are their barriers, what are their challenges. I think it's easy to assume what someone needs when they're experiencing homelessness because they have a lot. They have a lot of needs, right? It's like, okay, well, it's obvious they need this and that because they're living outside. But at the end of the day, like yeah, they might have 20 needs, but how do you prioritize what needs to meet? And a lot of that comes with collecting that data and analyzing that data, which we did early on with our survey collection, and really just talking with them, getting to know them. I mean, there's data that you can pull and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, like homelessness looks different in every community. We're in 6 locations here in Central Florida, and each, each community of of unhoused people in these 6 locations looks totally different, and the approach needs to be catered to that group. And that's why it's important not to just generalize, and we need to um, look and get some qualitative, you know, data and really ask people in these areas what they're needing. And I think like and like you were saying, I think like with stigmas and things like that against people experiencing homelessness, I think a lot of the time people like to go to one extreme or the other, like it's 100% their fault. That's one extreme, or and because of their choices, and the other extreme, it's 100% not their fault, and it's all circumstance. But the reality is everyone's somewhere in the middle of those two things, you know. If so, for someone, it might be mostly circumstance and very little of choice, and for other people, it might be maybe majority their choices that led them there, but with a little bit of circumstance. But at the end of the day, like everyone needs, the whole of homelessness is very deep. Everyone needs someone that can reach down to help them out of that hole. And that's how we approach it, regardless if, you know, um, what led them there, it doesn't matter. You're here now, like what can we do to help? Um, and like, with your story, I'll share this last thing. With your story, like we've served over 7,000 people experiencing homelessness in the past like 5 years or so. And the common denominator between these 7,000 people, because we get asked that a lot, like what's the thing that's in common with everyone you see? And really the common denominator is like a lot of people go to, well, homelessness is just caused by mental illness and addiction, right? But 5% of the general population has severe mental illness, but not all of that 5% is experiencing homelessness. So, my dad has a severe mental illness. He's not experiencing homelessness, right? So the difference is when someone goes to that mental health episode, that addictive, episode, or when they get evicted or lose their job, they don't have anyone that's able or willing to care for them when they go through that experience, and that's the common denominator. Everyone that we see, they don't have anyone that's able or willing to help them through that, and so that's what SALT is for a lot of people. We become that person, that group that is there rooting for them, that's there to support them and to believe in them that there's a way out. You know what I mean? So yeah, but
I love that. And oh my God, you're almost gonna make me cry because I relate to it a lot as like kind of like unconditional love. People shouldn't have to earn a space on this earth or in this country, which I roll. Like like I don't know any Bible verses, but I know that your job, like my job on this earth, is to be kind to other people and not judge them by, I always say I won the birth lottery because of where I was born into and where I was
mm,
born into and all of the things. And yes, I've worked really hard to get to where I am. But if you only look at that, then you're forgetting all of the other things that had to happen for you to continue on that journey. And, you know, you can't be oblivious to like we live in Florida, there's a hurricane, you could lose your home, and then fighting with insurance. And like you can't be oblivious to things that happen when we talk about circumstances versus choices. And like at the end of the day,
mhm,
I hope that I just have people that are kind to me, regardless of
right,
what I should have done. Maybe I should have saved, maybe I should have added like a hurricane insurance, like whatever,
mhm,
it doesn't matter. I hope that people are just kind. And so I really love that. And I'm like super committed to being on SALT Outreach Leadership Council and the work that you do because of that. Because I've also like when I meet you and when I talk to everybody, like faith is also like an option, but it's not something that you push on anybody. And I
Right,
think that
right,
it's beautiful because once you go through something like that, whatever it is, right? Whether it is mental health addiction or a partner or someone not being there or whatever it is that went through for you to be in that situation, to your point, all you need is the right hand to just say, hey, it sucks. It's gonna be okay. Let me show you some things we can do to keep climbing up. And for some people, that's faith. For some people, that's reading, learning, going to school, like maybe getting that job they wanted, or I like even having an address. I know there's like smaller tangible things like you can't interview for a job without giving an
right,
address or pass like a
right.
background screen. So I think it's really important um to your point to just be kind and
Hmm.
and I love that salt is that for somebody. I didn't even think like imagine having to tell a stranger walking to a building or ask for a shower when you're living probably like one of the worst days or moments or lowest. And you just
Hmm.
want to wash your clothes so you can go to that interview in dignity
Yeah,
and not be judged or looked at. So I love
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
love that so much. Thank you for sharing, Eric. Um, all right, I'm gonna have to skip over some questions here, but just because I do want to clarify one thing, and this is probably I could probably Google or Chat GPT, but like, I hear people say you should say unsheltered or homeless or the home like what's there with the lingo, and can we tell our listeners or teach them a little bit something about how they should approach these kind of this kind of language?
Yeah. So yeah, the word homeless has been um stigmatized a lot. And people, the face of homelessness has changed so much. Especially now, increasing rent prices. We have yeah, a lot of seniors and young adults and single moms that are ending up on the street, a lot more families. Half of the people experiencing homelessness in Central Florida are a child, a young adult, or a senior. You know what I mean? Like, the word homeless is so stigmatized that a lot of people in the homelessness world try to steer away from that word. So like really, homeless is almost what people use as to identify someone, but really what's going on is they're experiencing homelessness. It's an experience for them, and that's why you'll see us use the term like, oh, well, people experiencing homelessness. We just try to steer away from the word homeless, using unhoused or unsheltered. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the reason why we're steering away from that word a little bit. Yeah, personally.
Oh no, I love that and thank you for educating me. I think, yeah, I've heard you talk throughout the years. You've done many interviews and I know that like that's a big part of being able to talk to this community and about this community and representing them. So thank you so much for clarifying that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I want to make sure you have time to kind of answer this question. And if you could speak directly, and then I'll give you some time to talk about salt, but like if you could speak directly to the nonprofit sector at large or a nonprofit leader, what is something that you wish they would understand more or practice more, especially when it comes to serving people, who are experiencing some of the worst times of their lives?
Yeah. Um, so I think we're probably one of the only homelessness organizations that has a data team. We have a data analyst and we have the software to intake data. We report on that data. Um, so we're very big on data. That was part of our foundation, as I mentioned to you, doing surveys and collecting data, analyzing so we can know how to grow. It gave us a clear route on how to grow, and it also gave us um, it was also encouraging for the people we're serving, right? They in their survey they say, yeah, it's hard for us to access clothing and hygiene here downtown, and they see us pop up with a clothing trailer that offers clothing and hygiene. It's kind of like, oh, they listen to us. And so I personally, I think that when you're serving vulnerable people, again, it's easy to assume what's needed. It's easy to just provide whatever you think is best. But I think the hard part is putting surveys together, um, and collecting that data, looking at it, and seeing like, okay, this may have been obvious, maybe, but this is what people are saying, you know. And at the same time, the data does so much because it also helps you fundraise, right? When we're doing these surveys, we realized that there were people going on job interviews that hadn't showered in 3 months. I mean, that's a big a tool for fundraising as well to bring to show that reality of like, hey, there's people that trying to get a job right now to get off the street and and they don't have access to a shower. You know what I mean? Like like that was a huge tool we used to help us fundraise for a shower trailer. You know what I mean? So like I think there's multiple benefits to collecting data, analyzing it, and reporting on it, not just for clients, but for the organization as a whole. So I think I'd like to see more people uh, in this work kind of do more of that. Um, yeah. So that's my opinion on that.
I love that. I love that I mean, data is, no matter what your mission is, you're going to need it. And I love that you tied that back to the sector because that's how we're held accountable. And it's sometimes overwhelming and annoying. I'm going to use that word, like having to report out on every little thing that we
Yeah,
do. But
right,
at the same
right.
time, like you looked at it from this is necessary for us to be able to do our mission, for us to be able to, be ready for that next step. But also, yeah, it's going to help with fundraising. So thanks so much, Eric. The last question I'll leave off on, and then we'll shut down is what is next for Salt? What are some big dreams you have there?
Yeah, so we recently updated our mission and vision for the organization. It broadens our scope a little bit, as far as what we are able to offer to the unhoused. So we are looking to continue to innovate, to help meet the growing needs in the community. I don't know how much I'm going to share now because there might be some news coming out soon on some of the innovations that we're working on, with some partners. Um, but that's one thing. I think, our vision is national. We believe that every metropolitan area needs a comprehensive outreach center for people experiencing homelessness, and um, not every metropolitan area has that. You know what I mean? And it doesn't need to be. Our vision is not that SALT is in every metropolitan area. It's that there are these centers like SALT in these areas. So if it means us consulting with other groups, us empowering other groups to be successful, then that's a part of accomplishing our vision. Um, and so yeah, I think you're going to see some more innovation from SALT, as we move forward and as we see needs continue to grow. And I think you're going to see a lot more expansion of SALT to serve more people experiencing homelessness in more places. And so that's what's next. And I think yeah, we'll keep pushing forward to make all that reality. Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you brought like innovation into the sector and technology because that's really where we're going and where we're headed. And it's going to be utilizing that responsibly and it's going to, but utilizing it. We can't be afraid of it anymore. It's either going to make or break us as nonprofit leaders. And I'm so excited to see you expand. I also love that I talk a lot about how we've all worked together to also like create revenue for Salt, renting out the trailers for events when they're not in use, and I always use that as an example when talking to other orgs. Like once you know your niche, once you know your formula, like also replicating this, like it doesn't have to have Salt's logo, but then how do we train and uptrain other organizations is so important. And so there's definitely room for all of that. And coming from a place of abundance is really big
Mm.
for us. So, Eric, I'm super proud to know you and be affiliated with you and Salt. So thank you so much for being here. If anybody wants to, please donate to saltoutreach.org. I'm a donor as well as on the Leadership Council. And if you also want to learn more about them, do reach out to Eric or me through Palante, and I'll connect you with them. We've done a couple tours, just got to see the youth center. So if you want me to go, I'll tour with you all and get you to know what Salt is doing. But yeah, thanks so much for being in the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. This is fun.